Yeah, this is Paul Stewart with Auto Apps. We're going to be covering Service Advisor best practices using Service Connect and using the follow-up and marketing features built into Service Connect and also into the work in progress of Service Connect. We also be talking about a little bit of history. So when we talk about Service Advisor best practice, what we want to do is keep it simple. The biggest problem we have with not following best practice is you take a chance of losing customers or customers skipping a year. The biggest problem is customers do skip a year. They do go other places. And what we find is nationwide, 45 to 55% of your clients won't be back the following calendar year. What's really, really important is looking at your returning customers and your best customers, and how do we, if we're running a 30% retention on best customers, how do we get it down to 25%? And what we know is by following best practices, you can move your retention numbers by 5% very quickly within 3 to 6 months. So let's discuss the Service Advisor best practice. Before the vehicle arrives, do your homework, look up previous history, recommended service, and build the relationship. Start by building that relationship right from letting the customer know you care about them and their vehicle, and especially if they're a returning customer, you have that data available to you. And it's only available to you if you've added it into your follow-up and future service database. The next piece, and we'll be discussing the history lookup and the report that you can print out very quickly through Service Connect. Next best practice is understand and record the best method of communication for each customer. And just verify the best method of communication to ensure timely response. Discuss how you'll be communicating vehicle status, recommended and needed service. Remember, you'll be keeping them involved in telling a story. You'll be telling that story with lots of tools that you will have. One of the tools is, a lot of you guys are using digital inspections. You're taking pictures. You're doing estimates. But how does that get back to easily getting the customer to come back? And what we have found is the easiest way to take care of your customers is to track the next oil change due date on every vehicle you want back in your service center. We know through our years and years of experience that timing the follow-up correctly for the next oil service is the easiest way to touch your customer and increase visits and retention. This is real important. When you're updating future service, only add up to 4 additional follow-up items to the oil service, items that are easily understood by the customer. You're also going to want to track safety issues that may be timed differently, state inspections. You could have in the winter states, you got tire changeouts. In situations where your European shop and European car has a 10,000 interval, you may have what we call a mid-level service. So tracking that next service, next touch for the customer is critical. It needs to be a touch that shows you care about the customer. The next thing we're going to be talking about is to ensure each service advisor is fully engaged in reviewing their closed invoices for proper follow-up the following business day. So in 10 minutes or less, the service advisor reviews and updates their closed invoices for accurate follow-up. Updating the next oil service due date, adding recommended service to the date, also updating vehicle and customer notes so anyone can do follow-up. Again, this daily review process should take less than 10 minutes a day. Key to really making follow-up work is when you're delivering the vehicle, educate the customer on how the service center will be doing customer care and maintenance follow-up, either by phone call, text message, email, or letter. So schedule the follow-up communication, the next touch. This is a key component for increasing retention, building your relationship, and enhancing the service experience. We also have designed Service Connect follow-up to easily do customer care and oil service follow-up by text messaging and by doing phone calls and being able to record the clients that you called personally. So what we do is we found our customers with the highest retention have in-house marketing. They schedule the next touch. They schedule the next touch for the oil change. So we recommend a customer care 3 to 4 day follow-up, either a text message or personal phone call. The oil service do follow-up, a personal phone call works extremely well. And text messaging is another good way in, plus the email and the letter. So all of this is built into and designed into Service Connect, and we know following Service Advisor best practice will increase your customer retention by 5% in as few as 3 months. So with that, let's talk about the first thing when the vehicle arrives, do your homework. So if we jump into Service Connect, you see that you have a history icon. If you're talking to the customer on the phone, you can simply click on your history icon. You can put in the customer's first name. Let's say Nina calls us on the phone. I could just add her name real quick. It brings up her vehicle. If I simply double-click on it, it's going to bring what we call the vehicle summary page. The summary page allows you to see all the customer information that you have. You can verify the phone number. You can verify the email address. You see both of those under customer information. You also can see their address, and you can see number of visits and their spend. You also can see their history and see what they've come in for. You can see this customer's come in for oil changes. We have a declined work. They didn't come in before. And for future service, we can see when they're due for their next oil service due date. We could talk to them about the mileage. We're showing that 159,335 they're due for the next oil service. You also have the ability to print this report out by clicking on the printer button. This allows you to click or unclick any of the declined saved estimates. It automatically defaults the last 2 years, but you could change that and have all your years. What's nice about this, it gives us the email address. It gives us average monthly mileage. This is key as a service advisor in talking to the customer about how much they're driving their vehicle so we can time that follow-up correctly. You can see previously recommended work, and then you can, in green, you can see the service history of that customer's vehicle. So again, just right at a click, a quick lookup, you can look up history and look up previous work. Now, the work, if you don't do your due diligence and have that information there readily available, that brings us into, again, service advisor best practices. So it's important that we are talking to the customer, communicating how we're going to talk. Built into Service Connect also is the ability just to click on the customer, again, see their different phone numbers. You can see cell, work, home. You can see there's Barbara's. And we simply can click on the SMS, and we can go in and instantly send that customer a text based on the phone number that's best for them. So best communication, of course, we can do lots of different things, but when we get to service advisor and best practice, when the vehicle's there, this is the best time to be able to, especially when you're dealing with a new customer, and part of your inspection process in the bay should include looking at the oil sticker, or for the service advisor to go out and look at the oil sticker, take a picture of it, and then update the next oil change due date from that if you're not doing the oil change at that time. If we click on the vehicle, we get all that information of history. We can see there's no previous history of this customer and this vehicle, and this is their first time in. If I went to service activity, I can see everything that we brought it in for. We can even see the decline. So we're actively working on doing front-end work. We're doing a four-wheel alignment. We're doing a brake job and a brake flush. And then we've also, in our inspection, have see that it needs power steering flush and spark plugs and a battery replacement. Well, this is a brand new customer. This is a customer you're not doing an oil change on, so obviously they went somewhere else to get that oil change done. So this is where it's good to talk to the customer about how much are you driving your vehicle. It could be they're driving the vehicle 1,000 miles a month or 1,200. It's going to automatically default 1,000 miles a month for your new customers. Now, it's good if the customer had an oil change completed, let's say, last month. In this case, we can actually change that due date and backdate that to when they had that oil change done. We can even put the mileage that they had that done, and let's say they had it done at 170 for 12. We can change the last completed date, other than it'll default today's date, and then what this will do is automatically calculate the next service interval and mileage when it's due next by simply dropping down the mileage. It estimates that and then also updates the next due date, and so I simply add that, and that's the start of the most important thing, tracking the next oil change due date while the vehicle's at the shop. Now in this case, we recommended, we're working with a vehicle, we've talked to the customer first time, we really want to build the relationship, and in this case, when we look at all the decline work, I don't want to put all that decline work on there. We're doing a lot of work already. In this case, we simply want to say what they're mostly due for. Some of it's going to be maintenance, some of it they need to do. So you're able to have a drop down and just say the next time they do that oil change, we also want to relook at their front suspension. And you can type anything you want in here, and this will automatically store and track with that oil change due date. And we could also do AC comparison or anything, a battery service. We're just going to add that, again, keeping it simple for the customer so that they can easily understand it, and we're not going to use a hard sell. We want to just help them take care of their vehicle and make them a customer for life. So this is just building this. You can see if I go into another vehicle in my work in progress, that this is a customer that hasn't been here since it's here today, but he skipped almost 6 months from coming in. And you can see real quickly he had an oil change done, 5,000 mile oil change done on 12/10, but we have no follow-up. And this is where we need to look and see, are they due for their next oil change right now? And this is where you're going to increase the number of oil changes. What you want to do, or the goal here is, if the car's in the bay and it's almost due for its next oil service, or overdue for the next oil service, you want to catch that. You don't want to let that car out of the bay and not have taken care of one of the most important things that a customer may need, and it gives you the ability to retrack it. In this case, we can look at that we've recommended ball joints, we've recommended, and this is way old, so this is why you're looking at the car right now, and we're just seeing back ball joints, power steering flush, but right now it came in as a no start and a crankshaft sensor, and so now I just want to trigger, and so you're the service advisor, you're looking at the service history. It just becomes important that you say, and the last time we saw he did an oil change, I could backdate this. He's driving 576 miles a month. In this case, I just click here. I could go back to 2018. In January, we can see he's way old, so that's probably not applicable. I can go ahead and put his current mileage in. Say we're doing 5,000 mile intervals, and I just want to trigger this oil change to happen in September 9th, and I just go ahead and add that in right to the service interval right there. So in this case, it allows me to track the next oil change due date and then actually do recommended services. I can certainly add I want to do an alignment inspection at that time, and also the tire service or anything that we recommended, and all we're doing is timing that next oil change due date, any other recommended service. We've still got the declines based on how you're doing your follow-up. If you're using companies like Kukui or My Shop Manager, by doing this, what you're doing is you're setting the automatic follow-up just to happen. But what becomes important is timing that next future service correctly and having that when they're actually due for their next service timed at the right time, so when you're getting it. And then if you're doing it in-house, what we've done here by doing this follow-up is in the ROI marketing module in our writer, it's triggering it for an email and a letter. So we'll be looking at that when we look at best practices. So again, going in why the vehicle's here and adding that next oil change due date becomes part of your best practice. The next piece would be looking at follow-up. So when we're looking at follow-up, we can just click on follow-up. In this case, I've got some older data, but ideally you would simply be going back a few days. In this case, I'm going to go back the next business day or next 2 business days, and I'm going to go through and review the follow-up. Now, ideally, this review will happen very quickly if you're doing your updates while the vehicle's here. We're going to track when that was last done. We can see the customer. We can see the service advisor that did it, so you would filter by the service advisor. You could actually see any declined work, sales. You can see your make and model of the car. So in this case, what we're going to do is, again, we have 10 invoices. We want each service advisor to go through their closed invoices and update that next oil change due date on every vehicle. We can see that this was a first-time customer. This is the second time in. And so we can look at the work that got done from previous history, and then now we also can, and they've only had one visit. You can see they've only been in one time with that vehicle. We can look at everything that we recommended, but you can see right now that we didn't recommend an oil change or track an oil change. So this is what makes it hard if you're doing this after the fact and you don't have a history to work off the oil service. So in this case, I'm going to assume the 1,000 miles, assume the 3,000 miles, and at least get an oil service in the system to track with. So this is why it's important for you to be able to go in and add that alignment inspection, recommended services the first time in. You're the service advisor. You just work with the customer. You also can update any notes, so you have the ability to add customer notes. And by doing that, it just simply time stamps it and date stamps it, so you know when that note was added, either to the customer or the vehicle itself. So we're simply going to go back. The auto apps icon just takes you back one, and you can see that we updated this date. And we're just going to go through these, and if I did my due diligence, then we can see that we added that next oil change due date. We're looking at it. If we wanted to add other services that got declined, because we can see those very quickly. We can see, again, this customer's been in 3 times. And it just allowing you to know the customer, know the vehicle, and be able to just go through and very quickly go through. Here's a customer that you did an oil change on, and it didn't get updated. He was the first time for this vehicle. That's all they got done. So it makes it easy for me to simply go in, put that date that oil change got done, the mileage, and then based on my service interval, this is a 5,000 mile interval, I can just add that oil change, next oil change due date onto that mileage. It's synthetic. I'm going to simply add that synthetic. It's a new car. Again, want to take care of the customer through the life of this vehicle, especially with only 3,500 miles on it. So this is where I'm going to go through and look at each one of my vehicles, each one of my customers, make sure there's follow-up. In this case, we did a European oil change, it's synthetic, again, no follow-up. And so this is why Service Advisor best practices is so important, especially for new customers, because 60-70% of your new customers don't come back. Getting your repeat customers in and turning those guys into a repeat customer. So I'm just going to trigger that oil change for the next service interval based on that mileage. So that is what we're doing as we're walking through and reviewing closed invoices. So as we're looking at Service Advisor best practices, what we also can do too, we have the ability to review those invoices. We also could be pulling those same customers up for the 3 to 4 day follow-up, and I could easily be sending them a text message or calling them up. This was, in this case, as a new customer, I wanted to personally call them. We have the ability under FollowUp Notes to track if we made a phone call to that customer. And this is where especially if I recommended a bunch of work, and I do talk to them, and what becomes important is if I communicated that I'll be calling you in 3 to 4 days after your closed invoice to let you drive the car and just make sure your car's all right, you set that expectation. And when they're expecting the phone call, they're not surprised by it. You also could send a text message. Again, in a case, some of them you may call, some of them you may just shoot them a quick text. In this case where he had a lot of declines, I would just say, hey Martin, just want to call you on your Oldsmobile. Wanted to see how it was doing after we did your services, and then wanted to see if you had any questions on other services that we recommended. So again, it's all about how can I help you? How can I answer questions? And when you see the declines, you don't say, do you want to bring it back in for that? You're simply asking them, do you have any questions on anything we recommended? And then at that time you also say, and we'll be calling you back. It looks like in October we'll be due for your next oil service. So, and I can save that note. It's going to put it in history. I can see that. I can see any notes and any dates that got done with that customer. If I send him a text message, it's going to track that text message and the fact that I sent that text message. Again, you can have, thank you for your recent visit. I can personalize it by putting his name, checking how it's running, and then you can get your feedback by sending that text message. So that is when we're looking at best practices. We discussed doing your homework, looking up service history, recording best method of communication, updating the next oil service due date and any recommended work while the vehicle's here, and then be fully engaged in reviewing closed invoices, proper follow-up the next business day, educating the customer on how you'll be doing your follow-up, and then performing your customer care calls. The next piece we'll be talking about is simply the service due. So by going through and updating the invoices, doing your follow-up, I can go in and just say, hey, let me see what's due next week. Now, if you're working with a company that does your follow-up for you, you get to see what's going out. You get to review what's going out before it goes out. And so I just simply click on the customer, or if you want to do also best practices, it makes it really easy to call Andy. Andy, the easiest phone call you'll ever make is one to a customer about, hey, Andy, just wanted to let you know your 2010 Toyota Camry is due for its next oil service at 218,930 miles. Allowing you to, again, do follow-up. So you can still send that email, that text, automate it, but you also, and you're not going to, you may leave a voicemail. In this case, you're just simply leaving the voicemail. Just want to make sure we help take care of your car, and then I'm just going to track that I left that voicemail. And then go on to my next client. So again, by doing this follow-up, by doing this review process, Now I have the tool to have really good follow-up and really be talking to my customers and building those relationships, building those next touches for those customers. The next piece that we recommend, if you haven't been doing your follow-up and reviewing your closed invoices, it becomes very easy with this tool to do follow-up. So let's say I want to go back a year or I want to go back 8 months. I can just real simply type in this case, I'm just going to go back and just look at it a week at a time. So I'm going to go back from the 16th through the 21st, click on Review Invoices, and then now this allows me to look at each one of my customers that came in that week. I'm able to look at the customer and see that when he was due for his next services. I can see stuff that I'm looking at when he's due. He's coming up for being due. He's already triggered, so I'd simply go to my next customer. And if I have a customer that hasn't been back, we recommended work, it'd be real easy for you to go in and say, well, I want to go through my database list, and I want to go ahead and I'm just going to change this to 7, and I want to trigger a whole bunch of letters to go out on the 29th because they haven't been in. Chances are they're due for an oil service, or I could create a promo, and what this does would automatically set it up to send letters or emails out. I'd recommend the letters in a case like this when we're trying to jump start our business. We just simply go back in time and shoot this out, and all we're going to do is trigger customers that haven't been in a long time. We trigger that follow-up to instantly hit, and what will happen, it takes about 45 minutes to just depend on how many closed invoices you got, 45 minutes to an hour to go back in time, look at the follow-up, see if the customer's been back, and change it to today's date, to next week's date, trigger 100 letters that you want to send, and just do that every month. And now you have a campaign going to the customers, or maybe you just trigger a letter that has a $20 off certificate good for any service. This is where you could trigger, we miss you. We can do all kinds of stuff to get customers to come back in on a campaign by going back in time, looking at the customer, seeing if they've come back, looking at history, seeing the last time they came in, and updating the next due date for triggering up more follow-up. So this is what we call jump starting your business by going back 6 months, 8 months, and re-triggering the follow-up if they haven't been in. So this is Service Advisor best practices, looking at updating the next oil service due date on every vehicle you want back in your service center, setting the customer up for future service, and building that relationship and building those next touches.